Now, for those of you who were here last year, you may remember that I spent most of my time talking about our advocacy project in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. The quixotic goal that I laid out that night was to identify and promote strategies for reversing the age-old cycle of artist-led gentrification followed by a hostile neighborhood takeover by the forces of bland consumer capitalism. Well, tonight I'd like to revisit that topic and relate a quote from one of the panelists at a symposium we held at Galapagos Art Space. Now, this person is going to have to remain nameless since this is a high-ranking government official and I've got no interest in committing career suicide tonight. So if anybody here was there at that event, just, keep it to yourself. So first, let me set the scene by reminding you that we're at Galapagos, which is a kind of dark and gritty but vibrant alternative arts venue, and that the room is full of angry Brooklyn artists facing imminent eviction. So one of these angry artists stands up and emotionally asks what she can do to keep her apartment. The panelist's painfully sincere answer: artists have always been nomadic. Maybe you should move to Yonkers. Suffice to say, that suggestion didn't play too well with the crowd. In his defense, the panelist wasn't trying to be offensive. He was merely trying to offer genuine advice based on his understanding of the arts community and its needs. The romanticized notion of the starving artist as nomadic bohemian is well known to all of us in this room. And frankly, a life of ramen noodles and squatting in abandoned buildings may even seem exciting when you're 22 years old and fresh out of college. But sooner or later, you realize that it's impossible to prosper if you can't lay down roots. That means finding a home and participating in a community. By community, I mean both your peers in the arts as well as the wider community in which we live and work. Participating in your peer community means that you don't have the luxury of only looking out for yourself. When we face big challenges like the ones faced by those artists in Williamsburg, our only hope is to be organized, focused, and persistent as a community with a single voice. The wider community is equally important because they're just as wrapped up in this as we are. You're all familiar with the storyline. Artists move into a gray industrial neighborhood because of cheap rent and lots of raw space. A few years later, and certainly by no coincidence, the neighborhood becomes fashionable. First come the hipsters, then come the yuppies, there goes the neighborhood. Spiraling real estate prices force a mass exodus of relatively new artists and longtime residents alike. Well, as it turns out, artists and real estate developers aren't the only ones who've noticed this pattern. In recent years, artists, along with projects designed to support them, have increasingly run into opposition from established community activists. You see, artists see themselves first as contributors to a richer, more culturally alive neighborhood, and then later as victims of the ensuing gentrification. But for the people who lived in that neighborhood for 3 generations before we got there, the artists look an awful lot like the perpetrators of that gentrification. And since these folks are better organized and more experienced at the political process than we are, well, not to put too fine a point on it, but they typically kick our asses. If we are ever going to break this cycle, we must first learn how to engage the community that lives right outside our work studios. The truth is that we're natural allies in the face of challenges like this. Poor communication and mutual misunderstanding too often prevent us from recognizing that we have mostly shared interests and common concerns. I'm here tonight to tell you that there is no bigger, more fundamental challenge that the arts community faces than this. Until we can reach out to our neighbors, forge meaningful alliances, and together develop strategies for keeping our neighborhoods, we will forever be marginalized in a society that doesn't understand us and sometimes wishes we would all just move to Yonkers. For my part, I've spent the better part of the past year consumed with this challenge, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about where that's led. This fall, Fractured Atlas launched an ambitious 2-year project called Envisioning Cultural Vitality, which is designed to expose and combat this process of gentrification and push-out. We're starting with 3 New York City neighborhoods that represent different stages of the gentrification cycle: Williamsburg, Long Island City, and Soho NoHo. When we're done, we'll have a framework that can be applied in other neighborhoods or in other cities across the country. Now, there's 2 pieces here: community mapping and civic engagement. The first part, the mapping, is about standing up to be counted, both as individuals and as a community. in partnership with local community groups, we're going door to door, talking to artists and arts organizations, asking them to tell their stories and lay out the challenges they face. As this information gets collected, it gets fed to a whole team of policy wonks who are working on the ground with people in the neighborhood to develop strategies for sustainable urban economic development in which the arts and cultural sector is valued and respected for the contribution it makes to our society. The map itself will be made publicly available on an interactive website complete with personal narratives and artist profiles, making the sources of cultural vitality in these neighborhoods visible and human. Now, for the civic engagement part. What I didn't tell you about the mapping process is that while we're conducting these hundreds of interviews and surveys, we're also doing a voter registration drive. This is how we build political muscle. At the end of the day, I plan to walk into some offices at City Hall and up in Albany and say, here's what we've done in your district. We've built a coalition of several important local activist groups. Together we've talked to this many individual artists and this many arts organizations that until today have been completely below your radar. Here is a list of their top public policy concerns. And by the way, we've registered them all to vote. So let's talk about how we can work together to fix some of these problems. Envisioning cultural vitality is just now getting underway, but I think you're going to hear a whole lot more about it over the next couple of years. More and more, Fractured Atlas is taking a leadership role in tackling our community's biggest challenges through projects like this. We didn't set out to be an advocacy organization, but it's become increasingly clear that the community needs somebody to step up to the plate and take this on. We're prepared to do just that. Bad news about this kind of work is that as important as it is, it's expensive, and it doesn't generate any earned revenue. That's a big difference between these kinds of projects and the normal day-to-day services that Fractured Atlas provides. Membership dues and program income cover almost all of our day-to-day operating expenses, but projects like Envisioning Cultural Vitality can only be supported through contributed income. On that note, it is my duty to remind you that tonight's event is a fundraiser. Now, please don't tune me out and head to the bar just yet, because this is important. Every year, I stand up here and I ask people to give what they can to support Fractured Atlas. And every year, only a handful of people step up to the plate and contribute. And most of you, if you're still even listening, you're probably thinking, he's not talking about me, he's talking about those rich people 2 rows down. They'll write a check so I don't have to. Sorry, pal, I'm talking about you. Everyone in this room is a part of the Fractured Atlas community, and everyone in this room has a responsibility to support that community. Maybe your contribution can't be as big as those rich people's 2 rows down, but you still have the power to step up and say, I want to be a part of the solution. And that's what I'm asking you to do tonight. If you brought your checkbook with you, we love you. Just head over to the surprise box table and we can take care of you there. If you didn't bring your checkbook, we've tricked you. This year we can take donations by credit card as well. So you too can head over to the surprise box table where we accept all the major kinds of plastic. So that's it for me. I'm going to pass the baton to our featured member performances.